Maita Basa, thank you for joining us for our special Africa Day edition. I am going to be talking to Hadil Osman from Sudan, and we have decided to talk about all things creative sector from North to West to South to East Africa. Who are these designers? Who are these creatives? Do we know them? And why do we not know them? Maita Basa, thank you.
To allow people to understand what we're about to do, right? So we are going to have a discussion about the creative sector. Creativity in Africa, it's 25 May, new era, new things. We need to think differently and act differently. Not just think differently, but act differently, very importantly. So we want to talk about the creative sector as a whole, right? So last night we had a chat and we were talking about who do we know in the creative sector, and we want to cover people in the creative sector from north, west, east, and south of Africa. What is interesting is we actually had to do a Google search. This is interesting because if you are creative, I should be off the top of my tongue, right? What is happening with our creative? Do our creatives have a digital footprint? Question number one, right? Are we creating, when we do create, is there cultural meaning to what we're creating? Are we feeding our culture, our heritage into our creations? Question number two. Number three, it will be very crucial to explore what happens to our creative sectors now, right? And how can our creative sectors start contributing to the GDP, right? And are our creatives ready for global penetration? So it's very important to understand that it's one thing to say I'm a creative, but we live in a global village, right? So if
Exactly.
you're creative in Africa, you're creative for the world. Do you have a digital footprint enough for you to garner a global market? So that's the nature of the conversation.
Yeah, very
And you know
exciting.
what? I really am too. I had a thought when we earlier, and I thought it would be great to run down all the creatives that your lists, and I'll run down my list from east and west. So run down your list, and then we just get into the conversation.
Okay, brilliant. So I'm gonna cover North and West, and so I'm gonna go through my list. So for North Africa, from Egypt, we've got Amna El Shendawili, and Morocco, we've got Bakchik. We have Sultana from Tunisia, Bougroj from Morocco. Fun fact, the designer Anwar Bougroj is actually in the Forbes Africa list for this year. So we're together in this, yeah, this year. And then there's Amjad Khalil from Libya. Now we're going to West Africa. I've noticed something with West Africa. There's a lot of Nigerian designers that are taking over the scene. Like they're almost covering over the other West African designers. You know, when you're looking for information, I noticed that I would find a list of like 10 West African designers, and in that list, only 2 are non-Nigerian. So it's like 8 Nigerian designers. So that kind of shows you the kind of infrastructure they have over there. You know what I mean? So in this list, so for my West African ones, I've got from Nigeria, we have Zar Studios, which I love. And then we've got Lisa Folowe Studio, who's making major moves right now. She styled recently for Billboard magazine, which is insane. They've got Sally Rabi Kane. Yeah, Sally Rabi Kane from Senegal, which I found out that they follow me. Like, I think they followed me back a while ago, and I was like, what? Yeah, I was losing my mind today when I was like last night when I was searching and everything, and I'm like, oh my god, they followed me back. That's very strange. And then we've got Iman Asiye from Cameroon. Right? It's insane.
You're a boss. You're a boss.
We're trying, we're trying. And then we have Iman Ayisi, sorry, from Cameroon, and Dela Siburu from Burkina Faso. So yeah, that's my list. So 5 from each region.
You know what? I read that. Let me tell you, and I am not even ashamed to acknowledge. I read this list, and I did not know any one of those creatives.
Really?
And I pride. No, I'm just telling you the truth. I pride myself in being well read about the creative sector. I'm a lover of the creative sector and really passionate about it. But I did not know any of these designers and any of these studios. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, who am I? You know? And what am I really doing? So if I represent the creative sector of Africa, for instance, let's just think, what do we actually know? And what are we putting out there? Are we putting the best out there, or are we just putting people that we know as leading? I don't know. I
Exactly.
don't know. I
That's
don't
a
know.
good.
I don't know. But from from Southern Africa, South and East Africa, I have
Mhm.
Ladua Tokolo from South Africa. Of course, I
Mhm.
have to because of the way he has used the Xhosa culture to build his brand. I think it's very important to know. I have Gentile of Kenya. Kenya was difficult for me because I think everything in Kenya is buzzing right now. It's doing an amazing work. But Gentile, I like Gentile because I've seen the story grow. From the time I was in Kenya first in 2017, I've seen
Mhm.
them build this global brand. And each time I go to Kenya, they're doing something extra, something special, and it's quite amazing. And I have, excuse me, I just need to blow my nose. 1 minute.
No worries.
Fantastic. I'm back.
Awesome.
And I
Mhm.
have House of Stone from Zimbabwe. So House of
Love
Stone,
them.
I actually know House of Stone, and recently they worked in collaboration with, I think, Rulo Nondo, the representative for sustainable fashion in Zimbabwe,
Mhm.
and they
Yes.
produced an amazing documentary, which I feel like the whole world needs to know and needs to see because it mixes yoga, meditation, and the craft of creating a garment using several pieces. So
Mhm.
amazing, amazing. I have Mengishi Dole from Zambia, and I'm just gonna put it out there. I reached out to Mengishi
Mhm.
a couple of months ago, right? I think just when before or after COVID, I don't remember anymore. And I said,
Mhm.
look, I want to do a pop-up shop with you in Zambia. I think your brand is amazing, but I also think at Chinesai Africa, we have amazing pieces that if we do it together, we could just blow things up. And I'm looking
Mhm.
forward to it. Doing amazing. Her pages are amazing. Her work is amazing. And I think she's recently been recognized by BBC or one or the other. She was featured in one of these publications. There
That's
is,
awesome.
there's Mile Kolinas from Rwanda.
Mhm.
I've just learned of them and I've looked at their work yesterday, and I must say, remarkable work.
Yes.
Remarkable work. I mean,
I
what are we wearing?
Interesting.
Are we wearing? Why are we wearing anything made in China or made in Asia or made in Indonesia when we have these amazing designers on this continent?
Very
Um,
true.
I have, I have Taibo Bakar from Mozambique. Again, again, guys, I didn't even know this existed, and this is how bad it is. And I think it's bad because the cultural story these brands are telling
Mm.
is is ready. It's ripe and ready. The world needs to hear it. And yeah, I've got Yifaka, and forgive my pronunciation. Yifaka
Good.
from Ethiopia, another
Mhm.
contemporary Ethiopia, taking Ethiopian traditional wear and making it into a contemporary fashion collection. Love it, love it. I've always been a fan of Ethiopian threads, and they've got great fabrics, very
Yeah.
great woven fabric, great story to tell with that. I've got LM Lamode from Namibia. I'm fond of her. At least I
Mhm.
worked with her on a project, Fashion Futures. And I will tell you
Mhm.
something about the world is not ready. This woman is just style personified. She's stylish, she's smart, she's creative, she's just a mixed bag. And I just feel like she needs to get out there a little more and the world needs to see her. From
Mhm.
Malawi, I found this creative agency, which I found interesting. It's called uh, Koala Creative Agency. I loved that concept. The reason why I'm bringing them on is I loved it because it kind of brings the Malawi creative sector into a central
Mhm.
place. There's a central marketplace. So I imagine the ambition of their work is to see how do we bring all the creatives into one space. And
Mhm.
lastly, I have an amazing dancer from Zimbabwe. Name is Nora Chipaumire, and I think the world needs to see. I think she already dances for New York, and this stuff I found out as well.
Oh.
Look, I'm Zimbabwe, and I'm still finding out about the creative arts in Zimbabwe. So this is
Exactly.
the people, these are the people that we're going to discuss, guys.
Yeah.
Just parameters.
Her. Mhm.
And yeah, I'm ready for the first question. So tell me, what
Awesome.
was interesting about you doing the search for African creatives?
So, because I was like, when we divided our work together, and I was going to be looking for North African designers and West African designers, I realized that actually most of my knowledge is in East and South. And because those are the two regions in Africa that I've been traveling to most frequently and working in a lot. So it was kind of interesting. I knew several of these designers that I was looking for, or like, searching for, especially the West African ones. Like I mentioned, Nigeria is taking over the scene, just like how you've noticed also when you're looking for East African designers, you notice that Kenyans are taking over. So it's kind of
Yeah.
interesting to see, to kind of compare why is that so? So when I was looking at the, looking for these designers and searching, the one thing I noticed with North African designers is that it is so hard to find them. Like it's hard.
Mm.
There's no list. There are no websites or magazines that are highlighting, the top North African designers to look for. There's also a bit of like, it was also kind of hard to look for them because some of them are summed, they're summed into, being Middle Eastern designers as well. So it's kind of, it took me actually longer to look for them. And they weren't highlighted as much. Of course, they each have amazing websites. Some of them are very, very active on social media, which is something we're going to discuss as well. And some of them just have beautiful pages. But in terms of finding highlights or articles about them or features or blogs about them, it was almost non-existent. So that kind of made me think a little bit. And
Mm.
then you've got, like I said, so that's with North Africa. Also, North African designers, the majority are Moroccan, I've noticed, and a lot of them are either based in Europe, be it Paris or any other place, but a
Right.
lot of them are based in Paris. The beauty of it, though, is just because they're based in Europe, that does not mean that they forgot about the identity that they're trying to reflect. And a lot of them are made in Morocco. So everything is made in Morocco, but like the main haute couture atelier is based in Paris or somewhere else. So
Mm.
that was quite interesting as well. But from what I know about Morocco, for instance, is that, it has a lot of beautiful culture. There's just so many stories to tell, but I just don't think that they have maybe the right infrastructure for it. And also because of their relationships with Europe and France in particular, it made kind of sense that a lot of these designers were based in Paris instead. But yeah, those are my general overview. But it was also amazing to know like some of these designers like Star Studios from Nigeria, who I absolutely love. So the designer is called Ian, and he basically his last name is very hard to pronounce. It's Odiferen, something like
Ah.
that. I think I'm butchering it, but I discovered him on Instagram in 2015,
Ah.
and that's when he kind of first came out with his shirt collection. And I'm obsessed with menswear, so that's how I got to know him. And now he produces amazing casual pieces and like sets, like actual two sets, like two-piece sets, out of this world. So it was nice to see him grow because he used social media to his advantage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You've got other designers that they were able to get that American, Afro punk kind of like feature. So they were able to cross the ocean and go and work and address a lot of like very famous celebrities like Zendaya, for instance, and whatnot. So it's kind of interesting to see how a lot of them were able to still take that African identity, but specifically the identity of their country or of their tribe or where they're from, and translate it on the red carpet, for instance. But one thing they all have in common is that they
Mm-hmm.
all just want to show movement of fabric. They want to make African design accessible, even if it's haute couture, because a lot of them are, they're doing like specific pieces. It's just very interesting how they're just so, you could just feel the passion. You can see the passion, and you're like, wow, like you just mentioned, like, why don't I know these names? I should be able to like name them, like, like my name, like I know my name. I should be able to just
Okay.
say it right away.
it shouldn't be a Google search. And I love it. You know, I love the breakdown of understanding that there's a lot of passion that goes into these creations. I mean, I absolutely think you can't be a creative without being passionate one way or the other. But what I really think is interesting about something you highlighted, and I'm seeing a golden thread here, is we notice East Africa is booming, and we also notice that Nigeria is booming in the north, right? So Kenya for East Africa is booming. And one thing that seems to come up for me, because I just recently interviewed what Hamem is a talent producer manager from Nigeria. And one thing she mentioned in that interview, she says, well, you know, Nigeria has a lot of specialists or people that are specializing in managing talent that are working behind these brands. So in fact, they're professionalizing their sectors. The same thing is happening in Kenya. From my experience, and I can say this authoritatively from spending time in Kenya, is Kenya is putting into place systems and processes very robust that support their industries, right? So you've got on the funding space of it, you've got Hiva Fund that funds, that has very unique funding models that funds people that are talented to build their brands. You've got the metas, the hubs that are working to promote development. You've got, you know, Baraza thing. So in my sense, it's very, very important to note that one of the things that help us perhaps advance our creative sectors is to really think strategically about how we build systems and processes that will actually increase inclusivity in the sectors. And one of the problems we have in the creative sector is access to funding. I think that's the problem at the tail end. The front end is we're just not creating, and this is a hypothesis. It can be proved wrong. We're not creating we're not creating in line or appreciating our cultural heritage. Like we're not really introspecting into what makes me Zimbabwean, right? And when I'm telling a story through clothes or through graffiti or through art, why would the world want to buy this story? Is this a unique story in the world? And the only way it can be unique is if it's told by a Zimbabwean who is using their culture, their heritage to sell the story. And if you look at the brands that have done that, like Laduma, right, for instance, many that have. For me, Laduma sticks out because I've just been following his work with a renewed sense of love and passion, right? He took Xhosa. He wrote, in fact, he wrote a dissertation during his undergrad about how he would convert this work into a business, right? And he took the Xhosa culture and created this amazing collection, right? Why was the world so ready to hear it? Is because he was talking about a culture that the world did not understand. He put a contemporary twist to it and he used his voice. So this man goes to New York Fashion Week, standing ovation. Why? Because he's telling you something that you've never heard before. Taken something so ordinary and made it extraordinary because no one has ever heard about the Xhosa culture in that light or appreciated their fabrics or the way they knit, etc. So more of that, I think, from stemming from your first point is the idea that we need systems and processes. How do we get them? How do we put them in place to increase inclusivity? The other thing you touched on, which I want you to explore a bit more, is digital footprint. Why are the creatives not online? I mean, how else can we find creatives? If I am sitting in Paris or New York or London, and I want to know who is a creator in Zimbabwe, in Nigeria, in West Africa, how would I find you if you're not online? Can you talk a bit about that using some of the brands that you came across that have strong online presence?
Exactly. So I'm so glad we're talking more about this because everything digital is kind of like my thing. Like I'm obsessed with just like digital promotion and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
one thing though, before we dive into the digital, so back in the day, how, like a journalist or whatever would want to know more about an African brand, they would look into the publications, they would look into magazines, but we don't have that much in the continent. It's very expensive to have a print magazine, or to even, like, for example, there was Glamour South Africa, and there's Mary Claire, and Elle South Africa closed, for instance, like they closed in 2 years, I believe, 2 years ago. So it's quite expensive to run operations like that here. So that's where, digital footprint is, it's essential. And like I said, one of the main companies, one of the main brands was Zar Studios by Ian, who's Nigerian. And like I said, I found him, I discovered him on Instagram in 2015, and that's when he first came out. And he used to take his own pictures by himself. He has a very beautiful white, clean backdrop. He'll put a plant or something. He even modeled for quite some time before he started getting proper models to take pictures in his clothes. And then there's also there's Amna Shandawili, who's an Egyptian fashion designer, and I really love what she does because I think it's quite unique. I personally have never really discovered much about tribal Egyptian haute couture, and that's basically what she does. And she also has like a side where she provides casual clothing. So she takes incredible pictures, and you can tell that she's very passionate about her own identity and how she's
Yeah.
trying to touch on like the Africanness of Egypt, because Egypt is quite Arabized.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice that she basically, like, I've seen other Egyptian designers who are trying to get in on that boat, but most of them are doing it because it's trendy to be African and to have prints and to have color. But
Go.
she's going back. She's doing research, and she's been working for many years, like since I think 2010 or 2012.
Right.
So she's been
Right.
doing great. And I've also found out about her through Instagram as well, because she keeps her page quite active. She models her own stuff. She gets her friends to model for her, and they all look very beautiful and very diverse. So this is another brand that has a very clear digital presence, and she incites you to learn more as well about her. Another thing I would have to say, another brand would be, let's see, I'm just looking through my list here.
It's okay.
Lisa Folaweo Studio, which is another Nigerian brand. And I guess we can see, like, compared to the other brands, Nigerian brands, like I mentioned, are popping because it makes complete sense what you just said about them having talent managers. That's how a lot of the music scene and fashion scene is thriving like crazy
Right.
in Nigeria
Like,
because of that.
truly, you can't. I always say I'm a creative. And at my heart, I'm a creative, right? And I think one of the things that a lot of people never understand is when I left the practice of law and decided I'm going to be a creative, it was not I'm leaving the practice of law. It was how can I use law to influence systems and processes that will strengthen the sector that I love so much. In my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I'm a lawyer. I know how policy works. I know how to argue cases. I know how to build cases. I know how to package things. How about I use that and build a sector and help build a sector, enhance a sector, right? So you already have, every country has creative sectors, right? So my coming into space was not to leave law, but to bring law to it and to say, as a lawyer, how can I use my resources, my skills to enhance the skill? And to enhance the sector as I love it so much. And how do I build this sector so strongly so that when my children decide to be creatives, they can make a living wage? They don't have to struggle the way I struggle to sell one product, two products, because I can't find funding, I can't find money, or I don't have enough resources. So unless someone starts building these systems and starts talking about them, we will never improve, right? And this is where we talk the Nigerian story and the East African story. At some point, you need to get professionals to do their job. If you don't get
Exactly.
some